Home security doorbells are everywhere now. Millions of homes across the world have them, as they give people a way to see who's at the door, keep an eye on deliveries, or even check in on elderly relatives living alone. Natasha Flynn Farrell was one of those people. She had access to her mother's Ring doorbell for exactly that reason, because her mum had fallen a couple of times, and Natasha wanted the peace of mind of being able to check on her at any point. On the night of October 24th, 2024, her phone sent her a notification. She clicked on it at 10:27 p.m, and for the next 2 minutes, helpless and alone in her own home a few miles away, she watched the unthinkable happen. Her mother, Catherine Flynn, was 69 years old. She was born in Liverpool and was known to everyone who loved her as Cathy and to her children as Queenie. She moved to Rhyl on the North Wales coast 25 years earlier with her 3 children, Natasha, Catherine and Michael, and had spent the rest of her life there. Her husband, Mick, had passed away in 2011, and in the years that followed, her health had deteriorated. She was diagnosed with COPD, emphysema, arthritis, and a leaking heart valve. She was pretty frail and used a stairlift inside the house and a Zimmer frame to get around, as well as a wheelchair to go any distance. She lived alone at Kevendie Road, about a 5-minute drive from Natasha, who came to see her every single day. She made her meals, took her to her appointments, and stayed over when she wasn't well. They were best friends, as much as mother and daughter. Someone else living nearby was Dean Mears. He was 34 years old, from Bodelwithan Avenue in Kinmel Bay, and had been addicted to ketamine, cannabis and cocaine for years. He had a criminal history, having previously served a prison sentence for drug dealing, and after his release he'd been stabbed twice. He and Catherine Flynn had never met, and had no connection to each other whatsoever, but that was soon about to change. The evening before, on October 23rd, Mears had broken into his family's former home in Rhyl, forcing the current owner out and claiming the property was his. He was arrested, had his phone seized, and was released under investigation from custody in St Asaph the following day. Back out on the streets of Rhyl on October 24th, and high on ketamine and cannabis, Mears made his way to the flat of a friend named Courtney Shaw. While he was there, he began to spiral out of control, speaking to his friend and fearing that he may go to prison for his actions. But just shortly after, he left and was out on the streets again. Back at Natasha's house, she was getting ready to speak to her mother, Cathy. She always rang Natasha around 10:30 p.m. to let her know she was safely in bed for the night. Natasha picked up her phone, ready for the call, but instead received a notification from the Ring doorbell app. The following footage is what Natasha saw. She heard him inside the house, shouting, demanding to know where the keys were. She heard her mother's voice, and he began attacking her. Natasha tried screaming at him through the microphone on the app. She kept it open to record everything, and simultaneously called 999. But she couldn't leave until the police told her it was safe to drive over. So for those 2 minutes, she was completely alone with what she was hearing. Mears had run straight up the stairs, dragging Catherine out of her bed, a 4'10" woman weighing 7.5 stone, or just over 100 pounds, and stamped on her face and neck approximately 15 times. The attack itself lasted around 55 seconds. Less than 2 minutes after breaking in, he threw himself back out through the broken window and fled into the night, leaving Catherine for dead on her bedroom floor. He went back to Courtney Shaw's flat, took her partner's clothes, and told him to get rid of his own blood-stained ones. He bumped into his then-partner on the street and told her he had done something really bad. He walked through the streets of Rhyl barely clothed, breaking into more houses along the way to ditch clothing and leaving a trail behind him. At 3:06 in the morning, police eventually caught up with Mears at his grandmother's home in Kinmel Bay and arrested him on the spot. When they interviewed him, he gave no comment. Meanwhile, Natasha had driven to her mother's house, but police still wouldn't let her inside. Catherine had been taken to hospital with catastrophic injuries. Every bone in her face was broken, and she was suffering from serious brain damage. She never regained consciousness and passed away just before 10 p.m. on October 25th, surrounded by her family. Mears appeared at Carnarvon Crown Court on April 29, 2025, admitting manslaughter but denying murder, claiming diminished responsibility and telling the court he had no recollection of what happened that night and no explanation for it. When the prosecutor asked him directly why he had stamped on her face, he said he didn't remember, and when he was asked whether he had intended to kill her, he said he didn't remember what his intentions were either. 2 psychiatrists were called to give evidence, one for the defense who believed Mears had demonstrated an abnormality of mental functioning at the time of the killing, and one for the prosecution who could find no clear link between his violent behavior and any diagnosable mental illness. So, on the 20th of June 2025, Mears was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years and 128 days. As for Natasha, she says she can't even bear to hear a Ring doorbell. The footage of that night replays in her head every day. The thuds, her mother's voice, and the 2 minutes she could do nothing but watch, as her mother was brutally killed. It was the morning of April 7th, 2026, at around 9:30, in a quiet residential street called Burbank Court in Fairfield, California. A family lived there, a husband, his pregnant wife, and their 5-year-old son. The husband had stepped out briefly, leaving his wife and child at home, and then the Ring doorbell camera sent a notification to his phone. On the other side of that camera was Jason Thomas Nichols. He was 29 years old, and he had no prior public profile or any criminal history anyone knew about, and he lived in the house directly behind theirs. They had never met him, but he stood there, wearing a long black trench coat, a Demon Slayer anime shirt and flip-flops. At first he was calm, asking through the camera if everything was okay inside, saying there seemed to be something going on. The homeowner, confused, just asked him to leave, but he didn't, and he quickly became more aggressive.
Hi there, can you open this door, please?
For what?
I just want to make sure that everything's okay. There seems to be something going on.
What do you mean?
I don't know, I just figured I'd check on something.
I don't know what you want, man. Get out of my house.
Open this fucking door! Where's your daughter, man? Where's your daughter, man?
What are you talking about?
Where's your daughter? Who's in there with you?
Bro, if you don't
open
leave...
this fucking door. Open this door, I'm breaking it fucking down. You understand me?
Leave my house. You don't...
Are you okay? Is everyone in this house okay?
What? Everyone's okay. What do you want? Can you leave my house, please?
Can you open the door, please?
You have nothing to do with my house. Can you leave my house?
You know what my name is?
I don't know who you are. You don't belong to this neighborhood. That's for sure.
This is my neighborhood, though.
Yeah, I live there. I don't know you.
He said his name was Harry Dresden, the same name of a protagonist of a long-running urban fantasy novel series called The Dresden Files, which is about a wizard and private investigator who work on supernatural cases in Chicago and who's known for wearing a long black coat. Then he started asking where the daughter was. He kicked the front door, demanding it be opened, screaming that he would end the homeowner if he didn't open it, that he would kill him, that he was going to break it down.
My name is Harry Dresden, motherfucker. Open the door. This is my neighborhood. Open the fucking door. No, or I will fucking end you. Do you understand me?
As time went on, he realized they weren't going to let him in. So he broke through a gate at the side of the property and came in through a sliding glass door. Nichols moved through the house, ripping open closet doors, screaming, demanding to know where she was. The pregnant wife and 5-year-old were hiding in the garage, listening to a stranger tear through their home. He was calling out for Victor, a character from the novel who was hunted down and killed by Harry Dresden. It seemed like he was in his own world, believing he truly was Harry, and Victor was hidden somewhere in the house.
Victor, you around?
What he didn't know was that the homeowner was already on his way back. He walked through his own front door, armed with a shovel, found Nichols inside his house, and told him he was giving him one chance to get out. When he arrived, Nichols claimed to be military, and after a physical altercation, the police arrived and found Nichols outside the home.
Where is she? You might. Where's she? I can hear her. I can book you. Bitch, you son of a I'm giving you a check. Get the out of my house. Third room, bro. I'm telling you, get the out of my house.
He was taken to North Bay Medical Center for treatment and then booked into Solano County Jail on 4 felony charges: first-degree burglary, assault with a deadly weapon, criminal threats with intent to terrorize, and vandalism. Bail was initially set at $35,000. Disturbingly though, 2 days before the home invasion, on April 5th, a parent had reported an encounter between Nichols and their child to police. After the viral video circulated and Nichols was identified, that parent came forward again with further information, and officers found enough to charge him with a 5th count: annoying or molesting a child under 18. Authorities released no further details about that incident, citing the involvement of a minor. At his first court appearance on April 13th, Nichols sat shackled in a striped jail jumpsuit and smirked and rolled his eyes throughout as prosecutors detailed the allegations against him. The judge increased his bail to $250,000, citing the threat he posed to the neighborhood and the fact he lived directly behind the family. He pleaded not guilty to all counts. At his April 23rd court appearance, his defense raised doubts about his mental competency, requesting a suspension on criminal proceedings and have him evaluated by a psychologist, but the prosecution challenged that finding. A competency trial has been scheduled for July 2nd, 2026. So until then, Nichols remains in Solano County Jail, and the question of what actually happened on the morning of April 7th, and why, remains officially unanswered. North Ogden sits in the foothills north of Salt Lake City, a quiet residential community built into the hillside. On the evening of April 27, 2023, Scott Roberts and his wife Jody were at home on Mountain Road eating dinner when someone rang the doorbell. The man at the door was his older brother Jeffrey, but this was quite a surprise to Scott, as the two hadn't spoken for years. Scott Roberts was 65 years old, a Long Beach, California native who had spent his career in forestry, earning a PhD from Utah State University, spending years as a professor at Mississippi State, and at the time was the editor of Forest Science Journal. He and Jody had been married for 37 years and had built their home in North Ogden in 2017. Neighbors who knew him described him as a man who would take the shirt off his back for anyone. His older brother Jeffrey was 66, born in Long Beach like the rest of them, and had never left. He never married, never had children, and spent his whole life in the same neighborhood, in the same community, surrounded by the same people. His friend Julie had known him for over 40 years. She described a man who raised tortoises in his backyard, who loved motocross, who had worked the pit crew for Honda races in Mexico, who loved NASCAR, and was so well loved that when his trailer and bikes were stolen on a motocross trip, his friends pooled together and bought him entirely new ones. She said he never got into fistfights or was ever violent with any girlfriend, and had hundreds of friends in his circles. He also had no criminal history of any kind. But deep inside, something had been building. You see, their parents, Gerald and Jean Roberts, had two other sons, Harry and Jack, all born and raised in Long Beach, California. Their father passed away in 2003, then the oldest son, Harry. At different points, Scott and Jack had moved away, with Scott eventually settling in Utah. By 2016, it was just Jean and Jeffrey, living together in the Long Beach family home. Jean began showing signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, and Jeff took over her daily care and finances. He saw it as an enormous responsibility and, in his mind, a sacrifice the rest of the family had simply walked away from. What Jeff didn't tell anyone was that in taking control of her finances, he had quietly made himself the sole executor of her trust, without her knowledge or consent. When Jean's brother Jim came to visit, he found no signs of dementia and looked through the trust documents. He explained to Jean what Jeff had done, and she said that wasn't what she understood had been arranged. Jim had the trust changed, returning control to Jean. In the months that followed, Jean moved out of the Long Beach home and went to live with Scott and Jody in North Ogden. Before she left, she asked Jeff to vacate the house they had shared. He did, and he never forgave any of them for it. Jean eventually moved on to Missouri, where she was being cared for by a family friend. And as the years passed, Jeff grew increasingly bitter, talking about his family constantly to anyone who would listen, convinced he had been manipulated and cheated out of what was rightfully his. In December 2022, he found out his mother was no longer living with either of his brothers, but with someone outside the family entirely, which was another wound on top of all the others. And then, in April 2023, Jim and Scott began the process of making Scott the new executor of Jean's estate. Jeff eventually found out, and in the months leading up to his visit, he'd already written a handwritten will of his own, leaving everything to his childhood friend Randy Baker, and specifically excluding his family from receiving anything. He had told Randy he was going on a road trip, visiting friends, looking for retirement spots near Arizona and Utah, and wanting to be close to his mother. Over the following weeks, Randy received texts saying Jeff had passed through Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. On the 17th of April, Jeff checked into the Home 2 Suites Hotel in Salt Lake City, paying cash. He stayed there for 10 days. In that hotel room, investigators later found a laptop, a tablet, drug paraphernalia, ammunition, maps, and written directions to Scott and Jody's address in North Ogden. On April 27th, Jeff checked out, loaded his brown van, and drove north. In the van was a 9mm Beretta handgun in a concealed shoulder holster, a 12-gauge shotgun, a .22 caliber Derringer, 23 fully loaded handgun magazines, 88 shotgun shells, more ammunition, and several road flares. He had also left a 27-page letter in the van, addressed to Scott and Jody, to his brothers, his uncle, and his mother. The last line read that someone must pay, and that it was them. When Scott answered the door, Jeff said he had come to see their mother. Scott told him she wasn't there, that she was in Missouri being cared for by a friend of the family. Jeff asked how long she had been there, and Scott said about a year. Jeff then slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out the handgun. He fired 8 shots in total, with 7 of them hitting Scott, but miraculously he was still alive. Jody heard the shot and ran toward the front door. Scott tried to get the deadbolt shut but couldn't manage it, and told Jody to run. Jeff came around the door and shot her in the back as she turned and fled into the garage, where she crawled under the truck parked inside and hid. Jeff left the house, walked back to his van in the driveway, and returned a minute later breathing heavily, carrying a shotgun in one hand and a heavy bag in the other. Inside the house, he lit 3 road flares and placed them around the bedrooms. Then he walked into the garage and threw a lit flare under the truck where Jody was hiding. Jody got out from under the truck, hit the button for the garage door, and ran. As she came around the corner of the house, she saw a police car and ran toward it. North Ogden police were dispatched at 7:14 p.m. and arrived within minutes. As the first officer, Gabriel Mata, pulled up to the house, he saw Jeff come charging out the front door with a handgun in one hand and a shotgun in the other. Matter stopped the car and took cover behind a brick mailbox on the grass strip by the road. Jeff immediately opened fire on him. Up to 13 bullet impacts were later found on that mailbox alone, and more on Matter's patrol vehicle. 2 other officers, Richard Lopez and Dustin Farnsworth, were also on scene. Together, they fired approximately 52 times between them. Jeff fired approximately 30 or more shots, striking the house across the street around 20 times. The shootout lasted approximately 20 seconds. Jeff was hit 14 times, including 3 wounds to the head, and fell face down on the walkway leading to his brother's front door, in front of the house that was now fully engulfed in flames behind him. Scott Roberts was found dead inside the burning house. The 2 family dogs had also died in the fire. Investigators later retrieved their bodies and arranged for them to be cremated free of charge and returned to Jody. As for the house itself, it was a total loss. The 3 officers were all deemed justified in their use of deadly force. The investigation report concluded that Jeff Roberts was trying to kill as many people as possible before being shot himself, and that it was nothing short of miraculous that none of the officers were hit. Jeff's friend Randy Baker, who'd been put on his bank accounts and named executor of his handwritten will, drove to Utah to collect Jeff's van and his remains. Jeff was cremated and his ashes spread at the same location where the ashes of his dog Sadie had been spread years before. North Ogden held a candlelit vigil at Mountain View Park, attended by police, fire department, city officials and neighbors. Scott's daughter Kelsey wrote publicly that her dad had died a hero. Her mother was alive because her dad fought her uncle and told her to run. That was bringing them, she said, a small bit of comfort.